this person said, I'm 21 years old and seem to have lost my sex drive. I am never aroused when my sex when my partner is. What can I do?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, they don't specify.
I love that they make it, I know, right? They leave it real gender neutral in that. And so kind of we'll have to come at it from both angles here, both sides.
Perfect.
Here.
You know it. Go.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate you reaching out and going, hey, something doesn't feel right here. I don't know why I'm experiencing this, but it's creating some anxiety for me, either because it's creating relational distress and disconnect, or maybe there's just this kind of fear inside me about what's happening with me. What does this mean? What's this about? Lots of different reasons why a person could be experiencing this. And so as a sex therapist, I'd be wanting to ask questions like, how long have you been in this relationship? Are we married? What's the quality of the current relationship? Is there conflict and disconnection? Is the relationship otherwise close? Good communication? Are there any physical conditions that are involved? Are you on any medications? There's just like many questions that we as sex therapists would ask to try to narrow down what is going on here. But hopefully what you can take away from that is that there's a lot of different things that could be going on, and that lots of people face and have similar experience, and that it can be understood, it can be troubleshot, and whatever is causing it in your situation, that can be identified, and a pathway to restoring that desire in a way that feels good to you and to your husband and or wife, whichever the case may be for you, can be figured out. I think I'm just going to kind of maybe speak to a couple of common ones that come up real frequently. Sometimes there's a shift when you get 6 to 18 months into your relationship, particularly into marriage, right? Where for a wife specifically, the sexual experience shifts from a dopamine-driven experience to an oxytocin-driven experience, and that looks a lot different in the body, in the initiating desire department.
To the newbies, what do those hormones tell us what those mean, what each of those are, to the people who are watching who are like, what did you just say? X of what?
Right on. Yes. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain that is associated with pleasure and excitement. And so, Christmas morning when you're tearing open presents and you're elated, that's a dopamine that's flooding your brain, and you're super excited about kind of the newness that's there. And that gets fueled by adrenaline, which kind of amplifies the excitement and explosion. And then similar to, after Christmas, when you were a kid, 3 months later or a few weeks later, the newness has worn off. The dopamine high that was created from initially opening that present kind of wears off, and the toy kind of goes in a pile of other toys, right? Because that's how dopamine works. It's a flood in new experiences and the newness of interactions that create a really fun high emotionally that we experience. Oxytocin, on the other side, is not a high kind of experience. It's more of a warmth kind of experience, right? It's where we feel closeness and connection. It's an intimacy hormone where we bond with other people. Mothers bond with their children in experiencing oxytocin. Couples feel lovey-dovey towards each other in the oxytocin flood that happens in the body, and creates a warmth and connection. Well, when it comes to our sexuality, the newer relationships and the newness of relationship, that dopamine kind of drives the interaction, right? And so, especially as it's spiked with adrenaline here and there, that causes it just to be like this super high sexual experience that we crave and want more of, like eating candy. Some sort of like, tastes good, want more, right? That kind of engagement. When we normalize in a relationship, it's not exactly like, the toy on Christmas morning that kind of loses its excitement. But it is on the dopamine side. Dopamine kind of drops off, and oxytocin becomes the regulating hormone. That is the bond and the closeness and connection of our relationship is what modulates the sexual experience. And so if we're not aware that that's a normal transition, when we maybe experience some of our initiating desire as a female dropping off, there's a sense of something has changed here. And I'm not sure what it is. Am I losing my attraction? Am I losing my interest? When in reality, in a normalized relationship, it wouldn't be uncommon for a woman to only experience that initiating or kind of bodily craving for sex, but a few days a month, right around ovulation, her body drops an egg and gives her a little hormonal push that says, go find your man and fertilize this thing. But otherwise, for it to be more oxytocin, relational, receptive, desire kind of interaction. And
No, I
so,
love that you touched on that because I feel like we look at it and think it should be opposite, right? Like that we should bond and then we're always like lovey-dovey all over each other, super happy.
mhm,
But in reality, it's the opposite. And I feel like that's not what people expect. Even like I think of the expectations you have going into marriage. Like I feel like that's not something you expect.
totally. It can feel like a bait and switch thing. It's like, what's up with
Totally.
that? Like, we couldn't keep our hands off of each other before we got married. And now, we're, 18 months, 2 years in, something like that. And it's
Right.
kind of
Yeah. And that's
like,
a totally natural thing and the way that God designed it. But sometimes I think we have a tendency to say, well, what's wrong with us? Like, what happened to us?
yeah, Netflix and chill kind of went to actually like just
Just
Netflix
chill.
in my sweats and kind of sitting on the couch, kind of binging.
Yeah. Just straight chilling. Like,
Just chill.
I mean, genuinely, I've been married about 14 months now. So I feel like we have kind of gotten out of the newlywed phase.
Yeah.
And is that just comfort, just like being
Hmm.
together and not being all over each other, sitting on opposite sides of the couch and being totally
Uh-huh.
content.
Like old married people.
No. But I have a tendency to say, what happened to us? But in reality, that's just the way that God designed it and designed our hormones to react to being married to each other.
Yeah, it's so good to normalize this because I feel like what's really cool about oxytocin is that it creates, like, it meets a felt, like, the need we have to be connected and known and loved and safe. Like, it is literally, God wired our bodies to have a felt sense of that. And that is the like physiological aspect of God's design. And so whenever there's oxytocin and bond in the relationship, it actually protects the dopamine levels from going to addictive levels in sexuality, which is really because dopamine can be dangerous. Dopamine is kind of the neurotransmitter in the brain that is active with pornography and with sex addiction and with any type of
And
addiction.
cocaine.
And cocaine. And with sugar.
Seriously, cocaine causes huge dopamine. It hits dopamine receptors in the brain. And so it simulates kind of this rush of dopamine that you're having and burns out those kind of dopamine receptors to where normal life no longer creates a sense of excitement of life, that it requires like cocaine in
Oh,
order
it's so
to
crazy the way
feel
that
alive
God
again.
designed our bodies. It's so insane.
And I think that our culture can put forth like dopamine sex as like, this is what is good. This is what it should be like. This is like
Every
fun.
time, all the time.
And they're totally missing like really like our need. Like, yes, and I've been married 15 years and I can say that sexual connection and as you continue to grow sexually, that your relationship sexually grows and deepens and becomes better and better over time. And that what we learn is that actually how culture defines sexuality is totally wrong. Like what they put up is like, want this, get this is the best, this is the most amazing. It isn't Like it just isn't. And so I think I just want to say for couples out there that this is not like the consolation prize. Like oxytocin is not the consolation prize. Like it is actually the feeling of like, I'm seen, I'm known, I'm safe, like you're my home. And that sexuality in that setting is actually way more fulfilling than dopamine sex, which is really just about which is great. Like praise the Lord for dopamine in the beginning of relationships, because he wired it that way so people would actually get married and get together and like stay together and build relationships. But it's just like for God's design to be known by new couples out there, that it's like, this is a gift.
Yes. And sometimes folks, we'll see comments every now and then in videos or different places from folks that don't come from a faith background or a faith perspective, and they're like, Christians kill sex and make sex terrible and not fun and so on. And I find it really interesting that all of the secular research reinforces everything that we're talking about here, that all of the studies that around sex, go back. I remember when I was studying sex therapy and becoming a sex therapist, there was the first huge scale study on human sexuality that had been was done in recent years. I think it was done late 90s, early 2000s. I guess it would have been early 2000s that this study was done. And they're looking at sexual satisfaction, right? Who's having the most sex, who's enjoying sex the most. Like they're trying to kind of figure this out, right? And it came back that middle-aged women who were married and who were Christian in their faith were having the most sex and enjoying sex the most. And Rolling Stones magazine did a cover piece on it, said, "This Revenge of the Church Ladies" on it. Like it was just this insane kind of mind-numbing weird thing to believe that this could be true. But it's a feature of what Tish is talking about, that married couples who are in safe and established relationships have the most sex and they have the most fulfilling sex life, that the intimacy and the connection that's designed as part of sex makes for really fun and rich sex life that develops and grows year after year and gets better as time goes by. And the idea that it's supposed to be dopamine sex really just leads to heartbreak and trouble, because it's the same idea that we talked about with the Christmas morning toy, right? Like very rarely does a kid enjoy the Christmas morning toy to another Christmas, right? Before it becomes old hat, because that's how dopamine works. And relationally, eventually the relationship stops creating a dopamine high. And what that sets us up for is we've fallen out of love, right? And then I leave you to find someone else new that's going to create this dopamine high. And that wears off. And I leave you and I go somewhere else. And rather I go somewhere else and hook up and find a new relationship, or I turn to porn and I look for the continual new that's there, and I stay in a relationship with you, but I'm not intimate and connected because I'm training my sexuality to run off of this dopamine high that isn't sustainable in a normal, healthy, connected relationship. And so that mentality of that this is how sex is supposed to be is incredibly destructive to relationships, which then is destructive to the family unit as families break apart as a result of that. And the society is really jacked up by it. And so it has some really profound and far-reaching implications, the idea that that's the way sex is supposed to be and something's wrong if it's not that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I get a little passionate about that.
No, I love it. Tish, what would you say?
Getting our soapboxes out. We're like, can you tell we're a little passionate, Tori?
I love it. Hey, that's why
we see this all the time, man. We're like on the front row of it.
This one with you guys, because I knew that you guys were going to be passionate about it and excited to talk about these things with me.
We are so passionate. And I think that I've seen a lot, like connection is hard. I recently celebrated 15 years of marriage, and I loved what one pastor, I know, yay!
Congratulations.
Thank you. But one pastor friend messaged, and he said, a hard marriage, what did he say? A bad marriage is hard work, and a good marriage is even harder work. Congratulations on having a great marriage. But I'm like, that is so true. Like, connection is so hard. And if you look at your relationship and you're like, man, I don't know what's wrong, and this is hard, and it doesn't feel good, and there's so much pain, then like that, a lot of times I see couples kind of look at the sex life, which is actually a result of there not being connection. Like the sex life is disconnected and there's difficulties sexually, and whether frequency or there's, just like kind of resentment or blame or insecurities around the sexual life. And it feels like that's what's causing the disconnection, when really it's the disconnection is a relational, emotional aspect. And so with the person, I think that's my biggest question for them that is 22, like, hey, why don't I want to have sex when my partner wants to have sex? And I'm really curious about the connection. And, of where is that and what does that look like? And is that healthy? And what are the problems there, the issues there? And really being willing to take a look at that, because healthy sexuality, thriving, fulfilling sexuality, right, which God created us for, and we all want to have in our relationships, is an outflow of healthy connection. And connection is hard, Josh. I mean, it's so hard.
It is. And yet the isolation is even harder, right? Yeah. The isolation is traumatizing. And, there's this tug of war between the vulnerability of connection and intimacy in relationship and the pain of isolation that creates this tension just in all of our different relationships, that the fear of being hurt, the fear of being wounded causes us to stand back and be guarded in that. But then it leaves us lonely. Lots of married couples that are lonely, and they live under the same roof. They share a bed, but they feel lonely and disconnected from each other. And so they're feeling the pain of that isolation, even though they're, married and in a relationship. And so there's, it's hard work to engage connection, that connected, intimate relationship is incredibly powerful in terms of every aspect of our life. Like, it's amazing when you look at the research around it. The emotionally focused therapy folks have done some different research studies, and it's really cool to see things like immune response. And when you're in a healthy, connected relationship, your body is more resilient to fighting off attack. And people recover faster from heart attacks post-surgery when they have a healthy, connected relationship. Indicators for vets when they come back from war trauma, and suicide rates amongst those that have healthy, connected relationships versus those that don't. In fiscal stability, in terms of savings and money in the bank, and quality of life scores. And there's just on so many different measures, relationship quality and having healthy, strong attachments and connections in your life show up in every area of quality of life that you can measure. It's just amazing. It's almost like we have a relational God that created people to be in relationship with each other and have this kind of intimate connection. Like,
almost like that. And I would
almost like that.
And I think I would want to tell maybe this person that's writing in, and couples in general, like, I would want them to know to make connection the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
Be very patient with their sexuality and their sex lives while they work hard at connection.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to bring up their concerns, bring up their feelings, but to not make it about sexuality only. Because I think that's a recipe for creating more disconnection.
Totally. We get the cart before the horse, right? That a really healthy sexual relationship is the product of a really strong, healthy, intimate connection in the relationship, right? Which, again, because of the dopamine on the front end, can feel like the opposite, right? Because we barely know each other We don't have a deep, intimate connection. We just find each other attractive, and there's a dopamine high and an adrenaline rush from that. And so it feels like the greatest sex happens in these superficial kinds of relationships or connections. And so there's this kind of myth that we get caught in and suck in, when in reality that the richest kind of connection sexually and the most fun, pleasurable, and rewarding sex lives flow out of the deep connection and a healthy relationship.